So I actually believe that a nation's economy grows at the speed of its infrastructure. Um, the challenges that we had, just staging this event here boils down to infrastructure, right? Infrastructure eats into our time. It becomes something that if we don't pay attention to, right, it becomes a problem. And who are the greatest custodian of that infrastructure? The architects, the engineers, right? The practitioners in the built environment, in the built industry. I live in a world right now, leader of the building environment. May I say something controversial here? Please stop saying that, stop doing that. You have a role to play, right? Bring in the experts that are experts in certain aspects. The whole idea that you're a leader, the world has moved on from that matrix kind of mindset where you have somebody at the top and then you are directing. The architect, you're almost like the maestro, right? In a symphony orchestra. You know when to bring in who is playing the bass, you know when to bring in for everybody in the society. So the whole idea of, right, if you want to lead, you have to lead properly by actually getting everybody involved, because the world is very complex right now. Systems are very complex. You cannot be experts of everything, right? And it's very important to actually understand that. I thought that was actually a point, that is very important. So, I always say that if we design for survival, right, we will get survival. If we design for resilience, we will get resilience. If we will design for belonging, we will get a community, right? So it's really very important for us to know that design is one of the most powerful tools that has ever existed. Every society that you've gone to, design is a tool that they've used. And what is that other aspect that they use in expressing that? What is that other aspect that they use that tool in expressing? It's culture. You can use your design to express the culture in a way that works for the people and for the community. So if we design for innovation, we will get prosperity. And that was one of the reasons why the whole idea of, greening the economy, which is a real thing. I believe that, greening the economy, and the fabulous presentation by Mahmoudou Idumbi about how some of the green movement is actually going and taking hold. Nigeria can actually be a leader in that, because there's no reason why people outside, right, the continent, can get here and get all those things done. So just to kind of like, put it in kind of like summary house, we try to use culture just in a small, little way. Hopefully the Wi-Fi, will pick up, or, some of those things will be glaring. But if it's not glaring, that's fine. We can still have the conversation. It starts, for me, it was a lesson, of belonging, right? As far as I'm concerned. I mean, if my life was a passport, right, there's some obvious pages that I always will have to pay attention to. First on the list is Nigeria, right? Yeah, first on the list is Nigeria, and then I'll look at Southern Africa, whether it's Botswana, South Africa, and then, in North America, I'll pick, Canada, if I'm not that biased. But when you look at that passport, it is not a hindrance to express your culture and to express the kind of things that is important, to you, especially when you're dealing with communities. So one of my earliest experience was, working on the Federal Palace, project, which is not showing for whatever reason. Oh, okay, yeah, good. In Lagos, which is actually the site where the Declaration of Independence was signed. And it was actually a lot of experience working on that project, where you're dealing with legacy, you're dealing with relationship, and you're also looking at impacts that should endure, right? What to bring in and what not to bring in. So working with people like Kofi Duncan, who at that time was an architect at BBC London, and we're working, with Seyfarth architects from London and Desacom. That was a national monument that we thought that aspect of Nigeria's culture needed to be preserved. And across, other subsequent, projects, it was really very important, that the lessons from previous projects were kind of like transferred into that. I had the opportunity of working on the International Law Enforcement Academy, when I working with Femi Majekodumi in Southern Africa on that project, and the Botswana Police College, which is actually one of the most fabulous police colleges anywhere on the continent of Africa. It was so well done by FME architects. All the architects on that project were all from Nigeria. And the question, every time we hosted the Inspector General of Police, right? Every time we hosted the Inspector General of Police visiting that facility, the first question is, how much did this cost? And when we tell them how much it is, it's a fraction of the amount of money that are usually allocated for projects in Nigeria. The second question was, who did this? And then they look at us, Olabanwo, Sam Obo, Funsho Yewo. They don't sound Botswana. They sound very Nigerian. So why is this not happening in Nigeria? That's a rhetorical question. I don't want an answer to that, right? For now. So anyway, the whole point of this is, that's an aspect of our culture that we're able to take to the diaspora, that we're employing everyone to actually imbibe. The talent is here, everything is here, there's no reason why it cannot happen, right? So when you look at that, the lessons from all those, aspects was something that I took with me on some of my life-changing projects that I ever had the opportunity of doing. And some of those projects are the project that kind of like widened my circles. One of them is the Alberta Legislature Center redevelopment. And that's actually a multi-billion-dollar development that tends to happen once in a lifetime. The last time that project was done was in 1974. And we put a proposal together and strategically selected, the team that we had, and we were very successful in getting that project. We were the underdogs, but we ended up, getting that project. And it was really a very good opportunity to have had the opportunity of working, on those projects. And when you look at that, a lot of the lessons that we applied on the project, unfortunately, I'm sorry that, there's no Wi-Fi here and you can't see it. This presentation was done in Canva, and Canva can only operate on live stream. So we'll just, kind of like, manage it. But you will have seen aspects of the African culture that were actually incorporated in a legislature project that is in a cold climate economy. And not only that, we have, that in a cold climate, economy, even the branding, looking at the importance of, a single picture that was used to actually frame the whole thing. Our brief was very simple. That building was built in 1912, right? 100 years later, everything has changed. That was a building, when it was built, you are invited to the building. You don't show up. That's the building where the king and the queen of England, who are also the king and queen of Canada, right, stay. You get invited there. 100 years later, the value of the society has changed. It's now all about, welcoming, transparency, values, and all that. How do you transform a building that is very masculine, very unfriendly, into something that is welcoming? And that is where a lot of the principles of using, the African tree, right, or what is called the kotla in Botswana, right, or, the whole concept of Ubuntu, or the concept of Omoluabi, or the concept of Zumunchi, right, or the concept, of what the indigenous Canadian will call Witokoin, which is similar to the Ubuntu culture. When you start expressing those aspects of cultures in buildings, it becomes very welcoming. And at the end of the day, that was one of the things we succeeded. So what you saw there, right, is the whole, the sky, the dome, and the park, right? There's nothing you can do about the building that is very unfriendly, but there are a lot of things that you can do to make it welcoming to everybody, irrespective of where they are from or what they're doing. So I think it's even jumping to other things. There's a small project. This is actually a project for the African Canadian a civic engagement center. And it's a civic engagement center. So philosophically, just using some very simple parametric feature, something that is very symbolic in the African culture, the baobab tree is. I don't know how many people have ever had kuka. You've had kuka? So that tree that sometimes we take for granted, that's the baobab tree, right? That is the only tree that have almost more than 300 benefits, scientifically proven. That's a tree that grows in the eye, but that's the tree that a lot of the pharmaceutical industries in the West, come to extract what they use in their pharmaceutical things, and yet we of this generation we take it for granted. But our parents, grandparents, most of them actually know the importance. If you're looking for the best itching, agents, for instance, the skin of the kuka, plant, maybe I'm not supposed to tell people about that, but, that's actually one thing. So why is that important? The tree in Africa is our courthouses. Under the tree in the village, that's where you go and settle matters. So a symbol of life, right? Whenever there is a tree, there is something that is happening. So bringing that feature in those kind of, civic engagement center on a small, tiny project is a way of expressing our culture. When the federal minister of emergency services in Canada and the mayor of Edmonton and the rest opened this facility, it was a way of celebrating the Africans, how we want to use it as a token to kind of like represent an aspect of our culture that we can take to a diaspora, environment. There's also that aspect of, some of the, the consulate, facility. You can't see it, unfortunately. Those are some of the very, interesting projects, that it is. But the Wi-Fi is not making it work. So, but you will have seen a lot of the parametric, feature of the project, that are in there. But there are also, some aspects of African culture that we brought into high-tech, projects that I'm involved with, which is the Flock, which is through a startup, project in the UK, which we are actually deploying in different parts of Africa, Namibia, Angola, Botswana, and a few of those places. So, unfortunately, right, the project. So the last one I'll probably talk about, this is actually a small project, right, in the heart of cold climates, Edmonton is called the Simply Chop. And you can see every African that comes into that place, what you see there, yes, is a parametric representation of Africa, but it's also the seat where people actually sit. And it was a collaboration, right, that I worked on between professionals in Nigeria and in Canada. And we're actually able to express, we took a space, a very tiny space that was very uninteresting. And I think the only person that's probably been to that space here is RMD. He saw it when it was, nothing. And then how it's got, transformed, right, to that, wherever. For those that get there, you can see some silhouettes that you can relate to. The National Arts Theatre, all the streets of Lagos. And the engagement, aspect of it was really something. The other thing I'll talk about, which you can see, many people can recognize, that Arewa North there. This is a restaurant that deals primarily in suya. And for many of us in Nigeria, we know that suya is something that who sells the most authentic suya can relate, to that insignia, which is the Arewa North. And the lighting fixture of that facility had that, where you educate people, talk about that aspect of our culture. And the rate of engagement among non-Nigerians with this facility is absolutely, mind-boggling. The little there at home, right, becomes something that really fascinates people. So the whole idea is, look, do not, for any reason, be scared of expressing your culture in your building. Yes, we are in this facility. You look at all the very expensive material that we use outside. I think this building will have actually done way better using aspects of our culture. I'm not too sure. I wasn't here for Mamadou's presentation, but I don't know if you talked about some of the things that you guys are doing with Francis Carey, and all that. You can see that is an expression of our culture, It's ours. We should be very proud of it. Let's present it in the most way. And that's one of the reasons why, having, people that are non-architects to tell you how they were able to do it successfully in their areas becomes something that will be very important, for us, to do. So, what could contemporary architecture could be? I look forward to a time that we will express every aspect of our culture, which we were actually taught in schools. You did the whole concept of courtyard, cross ventilation, how to use all those things. But yet, when we get to practice, we saw cultural reading, right? Still going back, invoking certain things in the culture, in the African drumming, right? For instance, it is not the loudest strike that leads to the dance, right? It's definitely something that we know so well. It's not the loudest and the biggest buildings in our community that makes an impact. It's that little project that you've been entrusted to by a client that is less than 400 square meters or less than 100 square meters that you're doing. The restaurant that we're talking about is actually a restaurant that is less than 100 square meters. But the way it was designed to actually give an impact, celebrate culture, and get people that opportunity to relate to something that they are used to. So usually people will say, oh yeah, this is a small project, there's not a lot of money. No, that's actually a kind of like wrong mindset. So at the end, I'm going to end up talking about architecture as an economics. So the whole point is we're talking about economic resilience, and because, right, architecture as a tool for economic development is really very important, you can now start seeing the impact it will have in community when you are doing all the little things that you need to do. So I'll talk about, that aspect where you build with identity and security. These are just principles that I used to remind myself, right? When it comes to dealing with things like economic resilience. Championing local materials, every one of us actually know that. Influencing policy. What the NIA has done and has been doing, you all, can see bringing in, the Minister of Aviation, bringing in, people that have been in power. When you influence the policy, you tend to help improve people's quality of life. Whether it's designing for economic activation, right? How people engage with spaces. There are just a whole lot of things that you can apply that does not necessarily have to cost you any more extra, money, right, to achieve. So, at the end of the day, I already said that, the whisper that builds, the whisper that builds a nation has certain components, with them. And those components are things that we kind of already know. So I will just, end here, and I will just really implore us to really, really think about how we can use our culture to really advance the architecture of this country. I look forward to seeing that distinctive Nigerian architecture in contemporary times. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much. I want another applause for this one. Yes. We are not going to spend too much time talking about it yet. We are supposed to originally have 2 different plenary sessions, but they are actually organically connected. And we want to build our mindsets in the design industry. And that is why we packaged the speakers that we have brought in today. Now, our next speaker is supposed to be in the second plenary session, but he's here, and his name has been evoked in the earlier presentation, and I suspect that what he will be presenting is going to flow organically with what we are doing, even though he's not himself an architect. So I'm going to now invite my new friend, architect Richard Mofedamijo. Yes. Yes, Sam, we still have some more seats. Oh, okay, all right. Thank you. Sam has also turned into a technical assistant for us. Yeah, yes. So thank you very much. Unfortunately, I don't quite remember the title of your paper, but I'm sure you take care of that in your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's very apropos to actually call me to speak after what Sam just spoke about, culture and how it connects to architecture and actually shape culture and all of that. But first and foremost, let me say a very good and warm afternoon to everybody here, my elders and everybody here. Of course, like I always say, I'm not an architect, but I have the best architect friends. My father is here, Architect Majoro, and of course, my friend and brother, Sam Obo. I find myself in positions like this all the time. People will ask me when they see me in certain conferences. I like tech, so I like young people. My kids, I had children early, so I have kids that are in their 40s, early 40s and 30s. So I find myself in tech conferences, and they'll say to me, "What are you doing here in a tech conference?" And I will always say, tech speaks to solutions in the now. Sorry, sir. As a young old man, the young shall grow, sir. In certain places that when I say I'm 64, there are people that they come and bow to me. And I've been very good today, sir. You can see that I've been very good. So I get asked that question a lot. And I always say that, if you want to widen your horizon, you have to go to different places. I became a lawyer when I was already, I have to be careful now, because I became a lawyer when I was already a young adult. So, but not very many people also know that. So they see me in law conferences and they ask me, "What are you doing here?" And I remember the last MBA conference I went, I was a speaker. And when they introduced me as a speaker and a lawyer, it sort of caught a lot of people by surprise that, oh, we didn't know he's amongst us. And to make things even more strange, I have been in gatherings where actors are, and they'll still look at me and say, "What are you doing here? We thought you would have retired by now." And I always say to them that I'm not going anywhere. When they start calling you veteran and all of that, is a setup. So they say, Richard Prophet is a Nollywood veteran. I said, no, stop it. In this business, we will die here. So I had gone into the elaborate, plans to have a real beautiful presentation and all that, because I was trepidated when I was told that, I was coming to speak to architects. Everything has to have structure, So when you have good structure, there will be minimal effort afterwards. But because of all the challenges, I will just read my paper, and if Sam can help generate some of the images that we had so graciously worked on. His daughter had so graciously worked on for her Uncle Richard. It would be nice, but then let's just go. I thank the Institute of Architects for this honor. You have invited an actor among architects, a storyteller among builders. But then, what is an architect if not a storyteller in stone and light? And what is film if not architecture in motion? Designing emotions frame by frame. For over 4 decades, I have lived within stories as an actor, as a producer, and as a cultural ambassador. I have spoken the language of light, shadow, and silence to realize something. And the arts are not distant cousins. They are distant cousins. They are kindred spirit. In fact, an actor will say, after all, the world is a stage where all of us are actors. But the architect will count. Thank you.